Hello guys and welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast with me, Pascal Floor, and on the other end it is my man Steve Hall. Say hi, Steve.
Hola guys.
Hola. And I know what you are going to say. It's unfortunate that Ryan isn't here today. Yes, I know. I hate to admit that, but he did a fantastic job last week. And I'm actually a little bit scared and feared from my place in the Improvement Season podcast because he did such a fantastic job.
You're the funny one though, Pascal. I'm the boring English guy. I think I can be replaced.
I was hoping that I'm the king, but kings will always be thrown off the throne at some point, right?
Stabbed.
And maybe, especially, from the younger people. And Ryan is such a guy. He has the knowledge. He is sneaky enough. Yes, Ryan, I'm saying that. No, I don't mean it. No, he did a fantastic job, and we will definitely bring him on another time in 6 months or so. No, he will definitely come on because, I think so. I saw the video. I recorded the episode when I came back, and I was as pleasantly surprised. Well, not really pleasantly surprised because I knew that he's probably going to kill it. But he said it to me that he was a little bit nervous at the beginning, but you couldn't really tell that he was, and he killed it. He killed that episode, and I'm really, really happy that he did, because this is why we brought him on to Team Revive Stronger, because we have so much confidence in his skills and his abilities and his knowledge, experience, etc., etc. And mate, just given 5 years, just imagine that. He's still then younger than I am right now, and he will be so much wiser. Probably already white hair then. Yeah.
Ryan crushed it.
Yeah, Ryan crushed it. So I'm terribly sorry for the huge disappointment that I'm back now on the podcast again, and that you have to now live with me complaining and ranting about things again. I know that some people didn't like that, but that's just my nature. It's just like my sense of humor, of sarcasm and irony, and many things sound negative, but actually I don't really care about most of the things.
But where were you last week then, Pascal?
I was on a farm. And I'm not kidding, I was really on a farm.
3 days you're on the farm though.
Yeah, only for 3 days. So I was on quote-unquote holiday. Effectively 3 days. It's not really a holiday, to be honest. So came back from the London seminar on that Monday, which was, by the way, huge success in my opinion. And I see success, of course, it's always a subjective thing, how you value success. But in my opinion, it was like seeing all the people there who participated, who took a lot away from the seminar. Then meeting Gabrielle and James for the first time, meeting then Mike again, seeing you, Steve, and all the other people that we've already met in the past, and came back and was already like on a high, and then went to the farm. And I was around piggies, horses, ducks, for example, as well. It was actually quite cool. Especially there was one pig walking around the farm, so we were assuming that it probably thought it's a dog because it was always walking around with the dogs. So
thought it was a dog.
Maybe it thought it was a dog, and thus it was walking around the farm all the time. And yeah, it was pretty cool. But only, once again, 3 days. And then I came back home and started working right away, which is probably also due to the environmental habits. Right? You probably know it once you're back home, and this is also your working space, the tendency and the likelihood that you are going into that mode of working again is so huge. And everyone who's self-employed and working from at home can probably attest to that it is really hard to schedule your working hours when you're at home and when the private life mixes and blends with your work life, because those are actually the same environment, right? And James Clear is talking about that in Atomic Habits as well, like building your environment around that. And this is also the reason why some bad habits are forming, because you are putting yourself in a certain environment where that bad habit is always occurring. And I can't really say that it's a bad habit, but in that sense, it was because I wanted to take holiday, and then I was back home again, and because I'm always I'm working when I'm at home, I started working again. So yeah, that was basically that week in a nutshell. And yeah, now I'm back.
I was just going to touch on how, because I didn't say too much when Ryan was on, but like you said, I was going to make a joke, and I was like, you can define success by hard figures. How much cash did we make? Monetary income. That's how we define success. Exactly. But in some ways that's true when you think about things. But anyway, it's so humbling to get people to come up to you. You've never met them before, and they're like, and I will not misquote, someone did say to me, like, I changed their life, or Revive Stronger have changed their life. And I can't fathom that. It doesn't compute. It's like, I can't even see how that's a thing. But when I think of someone like, I don't know, Eric Helms, these people who I got first introduced to, I can say they changed my life. Oh. And it's incredible to get that feedback. And I'll also say Gabrielle said this was the best seminar that she'd ever kind of been to as a presenter. Yeah, she said it was the most fun and the best one she's ever done. Cool. So that was good feedback.
She didn't tell that to me.
She just sent it in a message at some point to me. I can't remember.
Well, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, no. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything you said there, especially like there's never enough time, unfortunately, to have a discussion with everyone or have a small chat with everyone. And it is. So we were 110 people on that day. And because of that, it is always just like, okay, hey, how are you doing? Right. And then over to the next person, because there's just such a short period of time of breaks and time after the seminar. And of course, because we are organizers, we have to take care of other things as well. It's not just like we are sitting there and enjoying the entire day. And that is a little bit unfortunate, but it's just the nature of running an event like this. So everyone who was there and who was a little bit ignored, no, not really ignored, but didn't really receive the attention that is appropriate, in my opinion, it is unfortunate, but it is also just due to the event. And I hope that at some point in the future, of course, we are getting the chance to actually find them some time like this, where it was just like, okay, let's have a chat here now.
We need like a Santa's grotto and a timer. Like you get 5 minutes of Santa and you're out. Next person in the queue and rotate. I know exactly
but
what
also
you mean.
please with sitting on the lap.
Oh, God.
Just imagine on Mike's lap.
Oh, God. Wow, he'd be quite good. Big old quads.
Yeah,
nice
but you're sitting on those massive quads, but you have to look down still because he's just so tiny. I mean, tiny in the height.
Yeah.
Right. So
nice and I can't even think of an analogy or anything to say on that. What was I going to say? I can't remember now. With the work thing, it made me, when you talked about environments, it made me think of kind of, obviously we talk a lot about sleep and how you should treat your bed as a bed, do only things that you would do in a bed, not work, not kind of do other things, eating, these sort of things. And I definitely found myself, Charlotte made me very aware, and she had to keep telling me, like, don't be on my phone in the evening, and like on the sofa, I need to get better at it, but don't work there, because now when I go on the sofa, I feel more relaxed and I don't look at my phone. It's like I actually just don't, it's the habit's gone of checking my phone in the evening. And I hate it when I get back into that, because it's so nice actually just have a full break from that. So I don't know, maybe I think the environmental thing and having like your working area is a good idea, which probably is something you can get really bad at when you're self-employed. I've taken my laptop to the toilet before, so
yeah. So, and that is the thing, right? Where are you drawing the line between, okay, this is purely work and this is private life? Because there's that high risk of it blending together, and all of a sudden you are not taking care of the things you would like to, because you're now having your notebook on the sofa or so, or on the couch, together with Katie sitting at your side, right? And it's just like you're focusing still on work while it is in the evening time, and you should be focused on other things, right? And this is something I catch myself all the time, and sometimes I can't help myself. Or this is an easy way out of saying I can't help myself, because of course I can help myself. It's just, it requires a little bit of attention and awareness, and a conscious effort of not doing so, right? But sometimes it's just like an automatic thing. And this is what a habit is, right?
Yeah.
It is an automated process that is already subconsciously ingrained. And this is what sometimes happens with me. I either take my notebook, sit down on the couch, and then answering some YouTube comments, for example, about how amazing Ryan was on the podcast and never want to see Pascal back on the improvement season again. And then I'm crying a little bit, and then I'm falling back into other things and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
This is exactly the thing I do, but with Instagram. And I end up saying to myself or Charlotte, like, it's not work because it's Instagram. It's like, but you use Instagram and that is just work for you, really. Like YouTube, answering those comments, it's work. It might not feel it.
And it is kind of, when you're arguing it like this, right? When you really objectively think about what you just said there, then to Charlotte, it is justifying your behavior or the habit that kind of it's probably not the best in that situation, but it just feels good, and you always want to kind of defend yourself for the habits and the things you are doing. This is just like human nature, right? Because if you always are against what you are doing, then you wouldn't be happy about the life you're living, right? And you would always be in a conflict with yourself, right? With just like, I'm a bad person because I'm doing X. Right? And of course, no one is I wouldn't say no one, but most of the people aren't living a life like that. And this is why so many people are justifying their behavior. It's always like when other people are doing something that is morally or ethically wrong, in your opinion, it is wrong. But when you're doing it, it is because you had a specific reason or a justified reason for doing so, right? For example, cheating on your taxes, right? When other people are doing it, they are, greedy scumbags. But when you are doing it, it is because you needed to pay for your children, get some new socks or so, right? You always find a justification for your behaviors.
We know you're next. Your next excuse. Needed new socks.
Get a call from the government. Get a call from the government, like tax bureau, and saying like, okay, what is this here, right? I needed some new socks. I hope you understand. That's all. That's all right, Mr. Floor. That's all right. What do you think about the last name Floor Komishke?
Komishka. Oh, is that Katie's last name? Komishka?
That is Katie's last name.
Floor Komishka. Works.
Yeah?
I wasn't not Komishka really sure. Floor.
No, we thought about that, but I don't think that it's even possible if we were to get married to actually have it like Komishka Floor, but I'm not really entirely certain how it was. But anyway.
We've discussed this, me and Charlotte, as well. It's like, who can who?
Yeah, because Hugo. So the thing is that if I were to keep my last name, so it isn't that I proposed to Katie. Just on a side note, it's nothing like that. But of course, we discuss things like these. If I were to keep my name, Katie would then take on like Floor Komishke, and Hugo, because he's not my biological son, he would keep his old name. Right? And that would be Komishka. So we would have 3 people in this small family with different last names. And that's why we are thinking about, if it comes to the point where we are getting married, then probably we will actually do or go with Floor Komishka, so that everyone then has that last name. And I just wanted to double check with you how it sounds for an Englishman.
So. I just think, but Floor sounds pretty English. Komishka sounds completely foreign. So Floor Komishka sounds better than just Komishka.
How's it called on English? Is it called Preußen?
Preußen? For what?
So Preußen is so back in the days, a little bit of German. No, I'm not going into German history now. But it was kind of a historic area, Preußen in Germany, right? And it's called like the Preußen area.
Okay.
Kind of a state, basically, right? And that name is Preußisch. It's called like that. Could have been that you've ever heard of it, and it's having a certain name.
No, I don't know it, but I'm not a good person to go by.
That's absolutely right. Let's rather talk about your last week because we haven't done so already.
Oh, yes.
So let me know whether you also enjoyed the company of some pigs or whether you just enjoyed company of some human beings. I don't know.
Well, yeah, it'd be a bit harsh to call them pigs, wouldn't it? But pigs are very intelligent until you said that you thought the pig thought it was a dog. It made me feel like maybe they're not that intelligent, but they're meant to be quite intelligent.
They are intelligent in picking their gender and race.
They can be. It's 20. Is it 2020?
Exactly.
No, 2019. No, we can be who we want.
Exactly. You don't have to pick a gender anymore.
Oh,
right?
Dear. Excellent.
Biology doesn't matter anymore. It's just about what you want to become.
Now I know why you picked the name Tony, because it can be gender neutral.
Yeah.
Whatever. Fluid.
Yeah. Totally. By the way, just because we've talked about pigs and then we get into what you've been doing like last week, I've never seen an old pig before in my life, like a truly old pig. And they are huge as fuck. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was 9 years old, and normally when they are getting slaughtered, they are getting slaughtered at the age of 1, right? And that was a pig that was 9 years old. And when we approached that pig, it was humongous. And then I was like estimating how much that pig may weigh, and then I looked it up on Google what the actual average weight is for a truly sized pig. 300 to 350 kilograms.
Wow, that's insane.
Yes.
I was not expecting that heavy.
Yeah, pictures didn't do it justice at all. It was...
That's ginormous. That's like a bear.
Yeah, that was actually what it was. Like I was approaching that and I was just like shocked because never in my life, and I grew up on the countryside, right? But never seen a 9-year-old pig, and that was humongous. Like that was truly a beast. Absolutely insane.
Should have got a selfie with it. That would have been good.
I did. But once again, pictures and videos didn't do it justice at all. It was crazy. I mean, if you ever get the chance to go to a farm just to see a bear-sized pig, do it.
I've seen some big pigs, but not that big.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, my week. So it's the first week of my new mesocycle, of which I got, I've changed it slightly. So it's not 12 sessions per week, which is nice. It's 11 sessions. So I get a bit more of a weekend. So I do AM and PM 5 days of the week. And then just on the Saturday, I just do one session. Reason for that is my split slightly changed. So I was doing legs, push, pull, legs, push, pull. And now it's changed to upper, lower, upper, lower, upper. Oh no, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower, upper. So the single session is an upper because basically that session is basically all 20 to 30 repetitions. So you don't need long rest periods generally for that. So
because I would assume, so I'm curious to know, and probably the audience as well, is it then on the lower days that you are doing it like you did in the past with AM quads, abs or so, and then PM hamstrings and calves or something like that?
So yeah, very similar. Splitting them up, hamstrings and then quads, but I do like calves, traps, delts, maybe some biceps to spread volume a little bit more on those days. And then on my upper days, it's basically all compound back and then all compound chest. But I'm manipulating kind of, am I more vertical or am I more horizontal? And I'm manipulating repetition ranges as well. So I normally work within like the 6 to maybe up to like 18 repetition range on average, and then kind of move between those and then add metabolite work on top. This is the first time I've actually incorporated like 20 plus repetitions, which is influenced partly by the new research coming out in that we can utilize up to that kind of 30 rep max, and that can still be set by set as like a hard set and like equally hypertrophying. And it allows you to probably, because it's just less fatiguing, I find. Like acutely it's quite fatiguing, but afterwards it's not heavily fatiguing. Like you can go in and do a 20 to 30 repetition set when you're already maybe a bit beat up, whereas going in and doing another heavy like 5 to 10 or 5 to 15 is pretty tough.
Can I ask you something then? How many sets are you doing of those 20 to 30 repetitions then? Because I have the feeling, especially with single joint movements, right, it's quite fatiguing acutely, as you already rightly pointed out so yourself. So when you're doing then a set like of bicep curls or so, the next one is just like so much underperformance already. Yeah. And then a third set or so is nearly impossible, which makes sense, right? I mean, just by doing 3 sets, you would have accumulated like 60 to 90 repetitions, which would be insane already in it for itself. So how many sets are you actually doing that? Is it just like 1 all-out set or just 2 decently all-out sets?
So I'm going, week 1 is always like 3 to 4 reps in reserve. That a 3 rep in reserve of a squat versus like a bicep curl will look a bit different. I think people generally like the 3 rep in reserve for a bicep curl looks quite tough, and people might think it looks like a 2 or a 1, but you can grind those out, whereas squats like I can't. So I am staying at the same rep in reserve for the first week. For most movements, even in all repetition ranges, it's from 2 to 4 sets, mostly 2 to 3, particularly for this repetition range. The most I did was 4 sets in the 20 to 30 repetition range, which I have today for leg press. I may only do 3 sets. I'll see how I feel after 3. And if I'm like, fuck, this is crazy, so I'll just do 3.
Funny, sometimes I do that as well.
Or to regulate it on the day.
Yeah, totally. Like I have it pre-planned of doing like 4 sets. I'm just feeling like, okay, this is probably not the best thing to do here today. And that's why I just cut it short. Most of the time, this more so happens either on those really heavy compound lifts or on the later exercises such as calf raises or so. And that's not because I don't want to do any additional sets, but it's just like, okay, those 2 sets have been giving me such a huge stimulus already. When I'm doing a 3rd set, it's just like providing probably too much fatigue for little stimulus at all.
Exactly that. So that's exactly how especially week 1, that's how I really look at it. Kind of trying to fit that just enough of a stimulus so you know you're going to be fatigued the next day. Because like today, I did 2 sets of straight leg deadlifts, and I was like, I could definitely do a 3rd like quite comfortably, but my hamstrings are pretty wrecked. Like they're not trashed by any means, but I know I'm going to be feeling that later in the day and possibly a little bit the next day. And that's all I want for a week 1 stimulus. So I think that's a really smart thing to do, but it's hard to coach others to get that. You have to kind of talk it through with them, and then they can talk it back to you.
I also don't think, because this is definitely something I thought of myself right now when we've talked about it, like how do you want to coach someone doing that? It's just like when you're not doing things as planned, where is then or where are you drawing the line between it's all right to do that and it's not all right, right? And is it happening on a frequent basis, and is it then getting unpredictable to actually cause and predict the progress in the future? Is it then more of a cope-out mechanism? These are things that you simply can't take care of unless you are coaching someone at the gym. You're always with them, but then, of course, we are talking about a completely different way of coaching.
And this is why we have that policy of we have to have worked with a client for 3 months so that they have an understanding at least of how they might go through a mesocycle and progressing things. Because if you just go straight to a cookie cutter program, because you can't individualize it 100% from just knowing them once, it's difficult. You can somewhat, but they need to really start analyzing it and assessing it as they go through the weeks. Whereas if you've gone through 3 mesocycles, you've done that together, they kind of get it. So I think, yeah, it's a difficult one. But yeah, with the 20 to 30 repetition range, it's really funny. With a lot of exercises, especially the hamstring curls, I got I think it was 26, and then it was 20, and then it was 16, and then it was 12, and I was like, shit, these fatigue the shit out of me. Calves as well, I got 26, and then it was I was struggling to get 18, and then it was 16, 14. So it's interesting to do. It's quite nice doing the high repetition ranges. I feel like that's a little bit of volume that I've not exposed myself before to, and it is light, and it does feel light. It almost feels like it's providing you a stimulus, but it's almost like it's recovering you at the same time, because it's feeding in, I don't know, nutritional partitioning and blood flow and things. But I'm really enjoying it so far. I think there's probably already some tweaks I'm gonna make to it, even after I'm just over halfway. There's a few things. It was mostly on my second push day. I didn't have any direct horizontal pressing, and I now know I get a really good stimulus from horizontal pressing, then going into flies. If I do vertical pressing, then flies, I don't get much. My chest doesn't really get much of a stimulus from that. So it's interesting. It's fun. I also learned for ages, I've liked skull crushers where you come not to the forehead, but you come down and then stretch behind, and I come back up. And to me, it makes lots of sense. You get a nice stretch on the long head, and you get that nice skull crusher movement. But my triceps never really felt it. And then today, or yesterday rather, I just did them to my skull and back up. I was like, oh my God, my triceps are pumped as F. And so I'm going back to that, because even though the stretch might not be there, I'm not necessarily hitting the long head much. I did 3 sets and I was like, oh, my triceps feel really, really good. Whereas normally I'm like, I can't get anything to hit my triceps well.
I find skull crushers and JM presses can be quite complicated to execute them correctly, because you can easily, like, at least in my opinion, flare out your elbows, take away a little bit of the pressure on the actual triceps, and you really have to stay accountable for yourself to not fuck it up. Right? It looks like a super easy exercise, right? Bring a bar to the forehead and bring it up again, right? Can't do anything wrong with that, but I find it to be quite complex. Well, not really complex, but one of the more complicated things that are easily butchered.
Yeah, I think when you are not so advanced that you don't have a good mind muscle connection and you can't feel it, like I can almost feel it when I'm letting myself off. I can be like that. Whereas I think a lot of people, they just need to be really strict with their technique, because they can't just like feel it out and know whether they're getting the stimulus, because they can't really feel the muscle doing it because they haven't got that wiring yet. So yeah, that's how it's going anyway. It's my body weight did some weird shit. It kind of in my deload week, it kind of spiked up and then it came right down, and then this week it was coming right down. I was like, what the, like I look like I'm barely gaining anything, and now it's come right back up, and I'm like, okay, good. It's coming back in, because I want to be, I don't have to, and I hate chasing scale weight, but I really want to be heavier at the end of this mass than my last one. If I'm ever not, I'm like, what the fuck was I doing? Because I should be heavier at the end of each mass. So that would be 200 pounds. But I've been weighing in 195 pounds the last 2 days. It's funny, someone messaged me and was like, so 2020, 220 pounds? I was like, not a chance. I'll be down in the 170s if I'm competing. So, or 160s even, depending. Gosh.
Yeah, I was quite impressed though at the seminar on the day 2 when we did the posing round with Jeff, went through the posing, and then all of a sudden you caught the bug and you got undressed as well, which is understandable, right? When there's a half naked man, of course you have to get undressed.
Jeff is very hot.
Yeah, and then you pose beside him, and it was just like striking me again how much size you gained over the past like year or 2 years. It's really insane to see that.
I appreciate that. It's actually really interesting as well to hear the more evidence that's coming out, and the more of the kind of experts are agreeing about how volume is like, you can train it, there's like minimum effective, that like people are agreeing on the volume landmarks. It's like, well, if you're training with lower amounts of volume, you'll just grow slower for like potentially for longer. And people have been asking me like, why do you think you've maybe grown so fast this off season? And I think because I've really focused on getting in a lot of high quality volume, and I think I've maybe just grown quicker than maybe I would have if I trained with lower volumes like I used to. I've just been more on top of that. It's really cool. I don't know if you heard the latest one with Menno and Abel, but that was, Menno said lots of things that were like, you're agreeing with Mike a lot here. This is kind of really cool to see Mike, James, Brad, they're all kind of coming together with these ideas of Mike. Menno was just like, it's fucking volume, guys. He was like, I push my clients really hard to the point at which they feel like they're overtraining. He's like, you're not. It's just, if you want to grow at your best rate possible, it's a lot of volume. So yeah, I really appreciate the words, because for someone, I don't know, I always say it to you, Pascal, whenever you compliment me, I'm like, it's like my dad giving me a compliment. I don't get it much, and it means a lot. So
it's like the people said, right? I'm complaining a lot, I'm ranting a lot, and I'm giving people, I'm giving some people a hard time, but just because I mean well.
And let me give you one back, by the way, because I've noticed recently you've upped your Instagram game, which has been good.
Did?
You've been on it a bit more. Stories, it's been fun. And you've been doing good stuff for your clients, but also you put up a physique shot not too long ago, and I was like, "Ooh, damn!" That it was at your home gym, I think, and you said you hadn't seen yourself in that mirror or that lighting for a long time. You're like, "Ooh, now it's coming together." So
yeah, that was actually so. I was training there. What was it? Yesterday, yesterday another time. Though not because of the mirrors or the lighting or anything like that, but it was, and I didn't really notice it because I was just training my legs, and I wasn't really constantly checking out my legs, especially because I was wearing those tight Reebok tights, which you can't really draw upwards because they are sitting so tight around your legs that you can't really, kind of. But yeah, it was quite surprising to me to see myself in that lighting, because this was the lighting I was seeing myself for over 5 years, right, in that gym. And then being away was like taking a picture and then not looking back at that picture and not taking a picture of your overall progress for like over a year. And then finally sitting down again, taking some picture, thinking that you have not made any kind of progress, and then comparing that one picture to the other one. And then all of a sudden you're realizing like, oh shit, I actually made some really massive strides forwards. And that was the same. And that lighting, I came back like after over a year of not having trained in that gym, coming back, being in that old environment, which I was still quite used to. I was there like sometimes even twice daily, right? So I was seeing myself really often in that gym for years on end. So it was coming back, and all of a sudden you could really tell the difference there. And I was really pleased with seeing something like that. And after all, I mean, we are naturals, even if we haven't done the Natty verified thing. We are naturals after all. We are naturals after all. And seeing them progress is a cool thing, because it's such a slow thing.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you are able to see something has changed, you know that you did at least certain things well, right? Could I have done a better job with nutrition, with training? Probably, but I also have a life to live and things I do enjoy that I'm not willing to absolutely sacrifice just for like maybe 1-2% more of gains. It's like that argument people are always making when it comes to, for example, the supplementational side of things. If it could get me like 1% more, I'm more than willing to do so. But you can't even tell whether it gives you 1% more, right? So you could always then make the counter argument of, is it worth it then, right? And for me, there was a clear personal preference and choice also of other things in my life that are important to me as well. And I'm still doing everything I possibly can in my ability and the willingness to put in there at the moment. And yeah, thus I'm quite happy with how things have changed. And a lot is probably just due to me reconsidering my lifting approach in regards to overhauling my execution and lifting technique, like over the last 2 years, basically, like going back on basically everything and redoing everything.
Yeah.
Like sitting down and really questioning, like, can I make it better? And can I make it more efficiently? And am I lying to myself when it comes to the execution? Am I truly feeling it in the muscle? Or am I just like still having my ego here, sitting on the leg extension machine, trying to move 70 kilograms, even though I'm not able to do so? Funny enough, that example, I brought it now down to 45 kilograms. Right? And I haven't gotten weaker or so, right? It's just that I fucking finally, and that took me a long time to leave my ego at the door, especially because I'm coming from a powerlifting perspective where just weight on the bar matters, right? No matter how, it's just weight on the bar, right? No one is asking you for a PR, even though it's shitty or not. It's just the number counts, right? It is what goes into your total when you got the white lights. And I think that this carried probably over a lot to my lifting mentality in bodybuilding. And then I had to reiterate and rethink a lot of things, because I always thought that moving the weight is the real deal, also for physique purposes. But it turned out that I was utterly wrong with that one. I always knew that there is probably something to my muscle connection and stuff like that. But I just thought that once you're getting just stronger, you will create so much tension on the muscles that it will automatically follow that the physique will come. And it seemed like that wasn't the case.
Yeah, it's actually ridiculously interesting and frustrating at the same time, because a lot of the things that we, at our age at least, are getting into bodybuilding for, and people we looked up to when we were getting into it, are kind of counter to what you probably want to be doing. And like, you have to almost fight against the ego of like more load on the bar, of going towards failure all the time, and actually holding yourself back and accountable to like clean, efficient repetitions, not overexerting yourself for no reason whatsoever, and just holding back. It's really challenging actually to do that.
Yeah. And also finding out when it's appropriate for yourself to actually make the progression in regards to load, right? Because not many people are talking about that, like putting a lot of emphasis on the execution and stuff like that. Because, I mean, let's be real here. When we take a look at the bros and the IFBB pros and stuff like that, they are all not doing really lovely technique and execution. And everyone is then saying like, but he's doing that, right? Which doesn't necessarily or inherently mean that it's correct then. It's just probably they can do whatever they want and they will still be getting enough stimulus out of that movement in conjunction with certain other substances with then a genetic proponent to it when it comes to receptor amount, etc., right? And thus, it doesn't really matter as long as they are moving something, right? And thus, it is kind of getting and learning for yourself, because it is the same as when you're getting into a new territory or learning about something new and no one in your environment, like private life or so, is into that as well. Many people know that phenomenon, and that is actually happened to them in lifting, that no one in their environment, like friends, family, or someone like that, was into lifting. And they had to learn everything for themselves. So they went onto the internet, and the first things they are finding are things such as bodybuilding.com. And they are doing a lot of wrong stuff in the first couple of years, doing a lot of just stupid shit until they are not seeing the results they would like to, right? And then they are going deeper down the rabbit hole, and then they are finding like places such as us, RP, 3DMJ, all those kind of people, right? And then they are finding a community they can talk to and interact with, etc., right? And then they are first starting to really think critically about their own approach and stuff like that. And it is kind of the same now with the approach of lowering actually the weight and not stepping away from only putting load on the bar and really focusing on the mind-muscle connection, on proper execution. And because there isn't a lot of information out there in regards to, okay, focus on these aspects first and then put on load on the bar, right? Load isn't the most important thing. Okay, when are you then progressing in regards to load, right? And this is something that you then have to figure out yourself. When is it actually appropriate? How far can you push yourself in that regard? Because it's all well and good that we are talking about gauging the RER and pushing it to the RER, right? But only you can tell how you perceive things. And because of that, of course, you have to still be a little bit like your own researcher, while at the same time being the subject of the experiment.
100%. Should we get to questions?
Yes, let's do that. So Mila from Korea, I would assume that's our Mila. So what is meant by carbohydrate tolerance? We know that it all comes down to calorie balance, and different macro compositions are personal preference differences. Yet I hear people in the evidence-based sphere use this term from time to time. Mike referred to this, saying he had an Asian friend who had great carbohydrate tolerance? Is it referring to people's metabolism responding very inefficiently to carbohydrate intake? I.e., increasing carb intake doesn't really result in a change in scale weight, but results in ramped up non-essential activity? This confuses me a lot. Would love to hear your take.
Really interesting, especially because you brought up Mike saying it, because I was going to say it doesn't sound like a term. I don't know if he'd agree with the way people might interpret the term, at least from what I'm thinking. When I hear that, I'm like, carbohydrate tolerance just means, like, I don't know, someone who has a large energy expenditure so they can take in a lot of carbohydrates for the most part. Potentially there is a metabolic component there as well. You see people who have kind of really high metabolisms given their body weight and what you'd expect like their BMR to be is much greater than that, and that's probably, or there is that genetic component slightly, but also the NEAT aspect as well. And I think there are some people you just feed them more carbs and they end up just burning more and more and more than you'd expect. And I'd probably say I'm on more carbohydrates than you'd expect for someone my size and my activity. Getting up to 600 grams of carbohydrates, that's a lot for someone who's under 200 pounds. That's a ton of carbs. So yeah, I don't know, carbohydrate tolerance, I don't think there is necessarily like I don't think that's something that's in like the literature, and I don't know what the definition and the kind of given understanding is within the evidence-based space. But I'd assume it's just someone who can handle a lot of carbohydrates as like a shorthand for it.
So from my take is that I never heard the term carbohydrate tolerance, or at least I never really heard it consciously. Like maybe I just overheard it because it didn't really stick out to me like something that is kind of a wrong terminology or so. But I do understand where that confusion is coming from, and what I understand when it comes to that, and maybe also the example Mike brought up with his Asian friend, probably he's referring to Charlie, a big Asian strong dude,
I imagine,
is perhaps something like insulin resistance, and how many carbohydrates and how fat you can become before it also becomes to not being as efficient anymore, or that you aren't able as using the carbohydrates as efficiently anymore. However, as we also know at the same time, and when I'm thinking about that doesn't really make sense, because when it comes to the insulin resistance thing, it's just like used way too often. And for someone like Charlie, and for someone who's fairly active, such as you, Steve, who is resistance training like 6 days per week, I don't think that insulin resistance is actually a thing, unless you are pre-diabetic maybe already, or you are like overly fat and highly overestimate your overall activity levels. Then this may become a problem. But I just think that when people are talking about carbohydrate tolerance, and this is just another idea I have, because once again, I never really put or lay notice on people talking about that, is maybe just like how they perceive themselves with, okay, I felt bloated after eating all of those carbohydrates, or I was tending to hold on to so much water after that, which is just like a typical normal byproduct of eating a lot of carbohydrates. If you, of course, are fluctuating in your carbohydrate intake from day to day, like one day you are eating only like 100 grams of carbohydrates and the next day 500 grams, of course you will see a huge fluctuation in your overall well-being, but also scale weight and appearance as well. I can tell you, so when I was coming out of that cutting phase I was doing, right? I was cutting for a decently long time, nothing crazy though. But when I then introduced the potatoes, I was first and foremost feeling so stuffed all the time. And also I was having massive digestive issues like the first 1 or 2 weeks because of that. After like 2 weeks, I could just eat them and nothing was bothering me anymore, right? Maybe there's also something to that you're simply not used to eating those or that many carbohydrates, or you're just introducing a food that you are not tolerating that much, or that is giving you somewhat of an upset stomach or so, most of the time the body is really good at adapting. As the potato thing just shows, in the beginning I just felt like crap, and then not really like crap, but not really that well, and after a week or two, nothing anymore. The body was actually then really good at just breaking down those carbohydrates as well. So this is just like a long answer from me with a lot of assumptions, what it can mean. And yeah.
The only way I've seen, I don't know, I just don't think it's necessarily in like an evidence-based term, but I've had people who can take, like for peaking, for example, you might say, oh, this person has a high carb tolerance because they need a lot of carbs to peak. Whereas someone like, we know Big Dan Smith, shout out, he unfortunately, I would say, has maybe a low carb tolerance. Like we didn't need tons of carbs for him to fill out and his weight to come up quickly. But again, it's just a term, and I think it's just people have different meanings, and we've chucked quite a few out there. So I don't think it's I don't think if you went to someone like Martin McDonald and you said carb tolerance to him, he'd probably be like, I don't know what you're on about.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, should we get on to the next question then? So,
oh no.
So it is coming from Jan, and then it says not Frisse.
Brilliant. I would have thought it was Jan.
But now I don't know whether it is truly Jan Frisse, but he's just saying that it's not Jan Frisse because he's always asking the most or the longest questions over on RP Plus as well. This one isn't as long, so bear with me. So do you think early intermediate trainees benefit from a full week of deloading after their accumulation phase? As far as recovery goes, I think you'd be fine. But as far as resensitization goes, I'm not sure. Personally, I felt way too out of it after a full week of deloading.
Interesting. So my always, whenever a question comes up of, can I shorten a deload? Do I need a deload? Shall I skip the deload? Is a deload necessary? I'm always just like, just take the whole deload. That's always my kind of just default answer. In terms of feeling kind of out of it, quite often I find it's hard to know because this is out of context, but I either find that happens when people during their deload week, maybe they just don't go to the gym and they don't kind of practice the movement, so they lose a little bit of technical proficiency coming into the first week into the next mesocycle, or they're doing something a little bit inappropriate in the next mesocycle, like that first week. So maybe they're pushing their reps in reserve very close to failure, and so they're not quite like, they need a bit of a runway. They need a bit of a base week or a foundational week, some people call it, where you start off where you started your previous week. Like you don't go from deloading to like your max volumes and your maximal intensity. You go just a bit higher. You go to that minimum effective volume, minimum effective dose. That seems to really work well for people where it's not such a large jump. And in fact, normally from when I program for clients, especially I had recently someone do their first deload and come to their first week and they were like, Steve, I feel like, basically they were saying they felt like a god. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I love this feedback. It's so great when you it was rare that we get someone like that now where we're deloading them for the first time ever and they've never done one before. But he was just like, oh, I feel so fresh. Everything feels so great. So that's typically what I see is if someone does feel a bit kind of awkward in their first week after a deload, is either that first week is inappropriately hard and they need to just bring things back a bit, or they just really didn't deload properly, and that is basically just going to the gym a little bit and reducing fatigue. So that's how I answer this anyway.
No, absolutely. And I've not really that much more to add there, because the only thing I would have said is probably the deload was still too hard. And when it is too hard, this is always what I'm saying, and I think I actually said it a couple of times here as well, and what I'm saying to my clients is when you're pushing too hard in the deload, then you don't get either the benefits of either worlds. You are not doing enough volume and enough intensity to provide a sufficient stimulus, but you're doing too much work and too much intensity to actually mitigate the fatigue that you've accumulated over the past mesocycle, right? And that will leave you compromised for the next mesocycle. Repeat that a couple of times during other mesocycles, and you will pay the price at some point, either with injury or yourself getting burned out, right? And thus, I think when it comes to a deload, there's nothing wrong with going too light. but there's something wrong with going too heavy and doing too much. Going in there, just doing a light session is all you need. Get a little bit of blood flow in. You don't need to make things overly complicated. You can even change exercises up as long as they aren't providing any kind of metabolic disruption in the sense of soreness or so. You can, instead of doing something like a deadlift or so, go over to the hyperextensions and just do hyperextensions, for example. There's nothing wrong with going too light. Going too heavy is. Right? And you could even make the case and argument of not going to the gym at all. However, there's always a counter argument to that. There seems to be something about quote unquote active recovery, going in there, just doing something for the blood flow. And it seems like you are even recovering quicker when you are still continuing doing something that is not overly stimulative or too heavy. And also it keeps your technical efficiency a little bit high as well when you're going through those ranges of motions, right? And you're doing something like a squat, which can always feel a little bit off after a deload or after you not having done it for like 2 weeks or so. Go in there and do it and just focus on the technique then, right? Don't focus on the intensity. And this is all I can say there. Rather go lighter than too heavy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a horrible situation for someone to get into. It's essentially junk volume. It's just, it will produce fatigue. It's not overloading enough to actually do anything for you. Brilliant.
Cool. So the next one is actually a little bit longer, from a Danish man, my man Nick the Dane. So, hey guys, thank you for making the best lifting podcast out there. Absolutely love it. Thank you very much. I just want to say Dan, but it was Nick the Dane. So always informative and professional while also managing to put a smile on my face. Keep it up. Compliments aside, here are my questions. Oh, maybe some more questions. The overall consensus seems to be that overall training volume, weekly, monthly, what have you, is correlated with greater hypertrophy response. However, do you think there could be a strong correlation between volume per muscle group per gym session and hypertrophic response? I'm asking this because I think I've experienced this personally. For example, upper body workouts. Training the whole upper body in one session don't seem to do that much for me, hypertrophic wise. Instead, I've had better experience with going slightly down in frequency and going higher volume per muscle group per session. Is this something you've experienced with yourself as well, or know of any evidence to back it up? This is the first question. Should we cover that one first and then head over to the second one before we are forgetting about that one?
Let's do that.
So I was already a little bit lost when I've read that. Maybe you
I'll
still have it in your head?
And summarize. I think he's kind of talking about, is there a minimum effective volume for a muscle group within a session?
Yeah, that's how I understood it as well.
Cool. So have you got initial thoughts you want to chuck out there?
My initial thoughts are, of course, we are going to release our footage from the London seminar on the 31st, so next week. And Mike Israel is talking purely about minimum session MOV, minimum session volume, and maximum session volume. So basically exactly what it is. So I would like to not really talk about that too much because, of course, I think that Mike, because he thought about it quite extensively, about that hypothesis of there being a maximum recoverable volume per session and also a minimum volume per session, is probably going to provide with a much better content, especially because he's talking about that for 2 hours in those presentations. But other than that, I would assume that there is definitely. However, also on the contrary though, when it comes to bro splits, you always have to then take into consideration that bro splits worked. Still, though, to what extent? When was the cutoff point where everything they provided additionally to that was not stimulative anymore, right? And this is something that we don't know anything about as of yet. It's just a hypothesis around, okay, maybe something up to 10 working sets that are hard and stimulative, maybe the cutoff point. Probably, as with everything, it is only an average thing. For some people, it may be a little bit higher. For some people, it may even be a little bit lower. I have a couple of clients where, so shout out to Z, that monster, give him a shout out at each and every single time. But with him, for example, I know that with some exercises, I can give him like 2 or 3 sets, and that's enough to cause a massive stimulus. He's also quite strong for his size, so he has a high metabolic disruption when it comes to that. Or someone like Jordan Peters, for example, when he's doing like 1 heavy set of RDLs, probably that's all he needs because he's just doing like 300 kilograms on those RDLs, right? Thus, you always have to, of course, have things into context and keep in mind that these things are probably averages. But yes, I would assume that there is probably something about doing too much in a session with everything additionally on top of that is just like junk volume, and doing too little is probably not enough stimulus to provide a decent stimulus. But yeah, I would be curious to hear your take on that one.
Yeah, I think Mike does he splits into like a 7-point thing of why there probably is a cap and why there probably is maybe a minimum as well. It's really interesting to me because there was always it was the consensus for quite a while that it's the volume for the week that matters most and the frequency matters quite a lot less. Whereas I think it's becoming more realized that frequency can actually play quite a bit of an impact in terms of, like you said, you could end up doing lots like a bro split, but like half that work could have been actually like causing fatigue, essentially like junk volume. And then there is the case of, well, if there's an upper limit, there's probably a lower limit as well where you're not quite stimulating enough. I think a lot of the lower limit things become like a practical thing, like warming up for 1 set of deadlifts or squats, and it's like, fuck, like you can't do that every single day. So I think that's there. But something like we've talked about before, I think, is the kind of biofeedback, and that's something we kind of referred to already earlier on when we were talking about auto-regulating in terms of like, are you getting fatigued within that muscle group within that session? Are you getting somewhat of a pump? Do you feel like a little bit of fatigue the following days after? That's a good indication of kind of if you're getting a bit of each of those or a couple of those, you're probably at around minimum effective volume. If you're getting none of that, then you probably need a bit more. And I think for some people that could be I don't think 1 set, maybe for something very disruptive like walking lunges, sometimes I'll put in 1 set, but rare that I'll put in 1 set. But normally like, and
then you can always make the question or the argument about, okay, is that the stimulus to fatigue ratio worth the trade-off to some other exercise? Maybe like, would it be better to actually do like 3 sets of something else instead of doing 1 set of those walking lunges, for example? What is giving you more bang for your buck? What is giving you less fatigue in return? And that is kind of where the experimentation comes into play as well, which is, I think, really interesting. And no one can tell you how much hypertrophy one exercise gives you over the other, and whether it is truly worth investing like 3 working sets with 1 exercise in comparison to the other.
It's really interesting because you have something like the deadlift there. I think if I introduced deadlifts, I probably could do 1 set and it would get me some stimulus, but I couldn't just keep it at 1 set. And part of the reason I could only do like 1 to maybe 3 or 4 sets is just because the fatigue ratio starts becoming so high. Whereas for someone weaker, it's probably in a superior position. So it's super interesting that we can finally, training is becoming something you can decipher a bit more, because I know when I was first getting into the industry, it was just like, oh yeah, you just do 3 to 4 sets of movements and you do like 8 reps, and it was just there's so much more science about it now. It's so fascinating.
It's crazy how much new papers over the past 10 years have come out that give us a better understanding of what may actually be not just a hypothesis but more so a true thing, right? And probably everyone knows that exercise science research is not the best there is, that it has many flaws and that it's quite limited, but it, as always, right, gives us a good understanding how things can possibly work.
Absolutely. So yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think we can go to his...
So, second question. Steve has been talking about having a very adaptable metabolism. Well, unfortunately, so have I. Do you have any tips on how to deal with it? Because of the large gap between amounts of calories when bulking and cutting, should you ramp calories up down in larger increments when switching? Or should you instead go slower? what is the better option for body composition while at the same time being efficient with your time?
So it's a hard one. I don't think there's necessarily... I think you start with the principles, you keep those good principles, and you apply them to you. And if you have an adaptive metabolism, you just have to deal with that. So that's things like making sure not to be in a prolonged deficit for long periods of time, give yourself plenty of time in maintenance and surpluses so that you have as high an intake that you're starting from. And then you adjust downwards according to how you're looking and also the scale. And for someone who has a more adaptive metabolism, that might mean more frequent changes. And I would go by making those more frequent changes and know that maybe that's just something you have to deal with. And I don't think you're going to somehow be able to get round it by keeping calories higher for longer. You're just going to be dieting at a slower pace, which is fine, but you could diet quicker.
So I've one client of mine, really cool guy, Michal from Poland. We started off with him being at maintenance at 2,600. He's not the largest guy. And it was so crazy. We've been ramping up the calories 1 week to the next, 100 calories and more. Still maintaining 100 calories more. Still maintaining 100 calories more. And now we are up at 3,200. And first now the scale is budging just slightly, which is crazy. I mean, like adding just 600 calories before the scale is even moving tells a lot.
Yeah, I don't know which position I think I prefer non-adaptive, because sometimes I get to a position where I have to eat so much where I'm just like, this is just too much. Like I shouldn't have to force feed 4,000 plus calories at my size and activity. And then dieting becomes really horrible because you get down quite low. And obviously I do things to mitigate that through like keeping NEAT up and getting kind of doing it in a systematic way, in that I get lean and then maintain, get lean. So it's not like I'm dragging things out. I'm keeping my metabolic rate as high as it can be by having kind of the primer phases involved and things like that. But I've had clients where I've put them in like a deficit and they've lost for like 3-4 months and haven't had to change it. And it's just like, shit, I feel like I'm not doing anything for you, but this is awesome that you just continue to lose and lose and lose. I think that would be quite a fun position to be in.
No, absolutely. So Nick had one more thing to say, and that is in Danish. So it's only for me. Så mere dansk på podcasten. Hvor meget dansk snakker du egentlig? Håber I har det godt. Genopleve stærkere gutter. I just needed to talk that out because he was basically like asking me how much Danish I'm actually speaking. Nick, I'm speaking Danish fluently. However, I got really bad at it. But funny enough, Rasmus, who's a Dane as well, who've been to the seminar this year as well, was at the seminar like 2 years ago as well. And so I was living together with Danish people. I was on tour with a Danish band, which you probably know. It's Dune. You've probably heard it as a Danish guy. I was a tour manager for them. And while I was on tour with them, I was also living together with Ole, who was the keyboarder, and was just like spending all my day together with them. I was like speaking Danish all day long, more than I was speaking like German. And during that time, of course, I was pretty good at it. And I also went to a Danish school. But now over the past couple of years, I hardly am speaking Danish anymore, which is unfortunate. But I also think, and this is something Rasmus said, it's just like getting used to that again. And I would assume that once I'm a week in Denmark or so, I would get back onto old levels quite quickly again. But yeah.
Like riding a bike.
Yeah.
Just need a refresher.
Definitely. So yeah, we are at 1 hour and 2 minutes or so. So I think that's enough for this week. I really do hope you didn't miss Ryan too much and it was acceptable that I was around here this time again. If not, just write it in the comment section and we see whether Ryan can make it at some point or not. I don't know.
I'm also disappointed I've not had any bicep compliments recently.
That's true, but you're not doing the takeaway episodes anymore, where the biceps is actually visible all the time. So if you want to
move my camera,
yeah, if you want to get some bicep compliments again, you probably have to restart doing the takeaway episodes. But I think we save it for a different time.
Yeah, right, guys. Thank you very much for your questions. We will catch you soon.
Yeah, cheers, guys.